Yes, and I'll try to
Sorry guys,
log
talk
back in.
amongst yourselves. Hello, welcome back. It is day 4 of commsHERO and session 3. So I'm going to start this one by saying a horse walks into a bar and the barman says, "Why the long face?" Tush. Hopefully that's the end of the terrible jokes, but I am going to ask you to drop in your best/worst jokes into the chat. Because our next guest took an intensive stand-up comedy course and has now booked in multiple gigs. She is, of course, here to tell us all about comms because, in true comms style, she has obviously used those lessons from her comedy course to inform her practice, and no doubt she's done a few lengthy LinkedIn posts to boot. So we're joined by Rebecca Sangster Kelly, and she is affectionately known as RSK, and she's a communications specialist and accredited Chartered Institute of Public Relations member, or CIPR, as the folks on the street call it. She's experienced working in energy, higher education, public sector, life sciences, waste management, retail, NHS, professional services, and the car boot.
It just keeps going.
I feel like you've just thrown some of those in just to test me. She's a stakeholder whisperer, and she helps individuals and teams overcome engagement barriers and influence their audiences. So we are very excited about having RSK here today. She won't be able to hear the laughter, which sometimes happens at her gigs. But she will be able to see your smiley face emojis if she does make any jokes. So thank you for being here, RSK, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much, Tila. Hello, everyone. So, yes, I'm here to talk about stand-up comedy journey and how it's made me a better communicator. And I will go into what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, etc. So I will do who am I? Comms and humor. Does it fit? Why stand-up comedy? Which you're probably thinking, yeah, there's other ways, Rebecca. What I learned, how it's improved my work, and I'm the full point of this is to get you guys to think about how to approach your CPD in a different way. So pick your new CPD adventure. And then, of course, because I need audiences to come out and support me, where you can find a show I'll be at. All right. So, yes. Who am I? So, as Tila says, I'm a stakeholder whisperer. The reason I say that is that I profile audiences and I help people understand what they need to move their audience from point A to point B. And that can be with teams and leaders in organizations. Focus primarily on internal comms, can be external. But by night, I'm a newbie comic on the open mic scene. Yes, and it is a very different world, but in a really great way. And it's not one that I intended to pursue. So I'm saying that right now that this new second life of mine was not why I did it and why I went into doing a stand-up comedy course. But you might say now, comms in humor. So humor can help us connect with our audience, demonstrate authenticity or show that we're genuine, and it can liven up stale, boring information. So it's really what's the word? It's really great that I'm after Hal Reynolds' session because she's talking about TikTok and it's about using humor. And as she showed, you can use humor to liven up what you would think would be stale, dull, rote information and make it very interesting and engaging. So humor connects us. But it is usually outside our comfort zone because it's really taking a chance. It's making assumptions and thinking, oh, someone's going to find that funny, and being scared to death that they won't laugh, that they won't be amused, that they'll think that our humor is out of touch or just weird. So it makes us very vulnerable, but it can be very powerful. So why stand up? Because there, as mentioned, there's other ways you can learn about humor. So I first was curious. I'd always seen it and been like, huh, that's interesting. And I should mention that I am a former Toastmaster and not a Toastmaster that opens weddings. Toastmasters International is a public speaking club, and I was a member for nearly over 7 years. And in that, I learned how to present and did it for so long that now, as a communications coach, I help people prepare for their presentations, s- walk the right way, stand the right way, eliminate their verbal pauses, filler words, etc. So I had heard of people in my public speaking club that they'd gone and done a stand-up comedy course, but that was when I was a lot younger and did not have disposable income, and I was like, sounds cool, but I don't know what I'd use it for. So there's always been in the back of my mind for the last several years that, that's something I could do. The opposite of the opposite of a corporate environment. So I do like turning the corporate environment on its head. I like challenging my clients. I enjoy taking risks and pushing people to do things outside their comfort zone. So that means I also need to be prepared to do things outside my comfort zone and push myself and make myself uncomfortable to learn. So it is that piece of being, I know that I'll be uncomfortable doing it, so I can't expect my clients to do things if I'm not going to push myself. And yeah, public speaking on steroids. Like I thought it was going to, so this is a observation now versus as well as I thought it'd be cool. Because when you start doing stand-up comedy, it is, if you have public speaking skills already, it does add so many other variables that you're managing that I'll go into later that it takes it to another level of challenge. So if you like a challenge, stand-up comedy does bring it. There is an also, because I read a book last year, so it's called Humor Seriously, and one of the co-authors is a stand-up comedian and a lecturer at Stanford University, and she talks about humor in business. And so when I read that she did that, I thought, oh, someone can be a stand-up comic for fun. I'd never thought of that. So I had always thought that people just become stand-up comics, kind of like someone who's an actor, like they're an actor, they try to, they're maybe a starving actor or they might be successful. I thought comics are the same way. But it's something people do as a hobby. So I thought, a business person does it. They're putting themselves out there. They're making themselves quite vulnerable in from being from a corporate environment, like a university environment, but they're teaching corporate people. So it's like, okay. And then lastly, I don't know if anyone's seen Ali Wong's Baby Cobra or Hard Knock Wife specials on Netflix. So she's done both pregnant. And I, as a mother and having gone through pregnancy, I loved seeing a woman take that position in comedy, in such, and present while pregnant. It's just showing that, yeah, women, we can do everything, even if we look like we're invalids because we're carrying another parasite. So it's kind of like that representation piece. Like you see someone doing something, you're like, I thought it was more male. Like I know there's more men in comedy, but I'm like, I love this. And it really did inspire in the back of my mind. So when I found the course, I was like, get in. I'm going to do that. So I signed up. So you're like, okay, Rebecca, where do you do a stand-up comedy course? There are actually quite a few stand-up comedy courses. And the one I did is near Camden at the Comedy School. That's a charity. And as well as did a 6-week intensive comedy course with them. They also do courses at prisons to help people who are serving their time learn how to use humor. They do yeah, they do all sorts of stuff in the community to using comedy for people. So if you're interested in looking up the comedy school, do recommend it. Because in 6 weeks of 3 hours a week for 6 weeks, I learned a lot. And first, I learned you have to be honest with yourself and see who you are and understand and accept how other people see you. And one interesting thing was when we started the course, there were two course mates who, after our tutor, who's a professional comedian, he made some jokes around the woman being a bit posh. She was an English woman from West London. Yes, she was posh, but she couldn't handle it, and she and the other friend who joined the course, they demanded their money back because they were so insulted. The thing when you're doing stand-up comedy is that you have no room to have ego, and you have to accept that that's how people see you. But that's your strength once you have it, because you, when you make jokes, you're making it based on how you see yourself, but also how people perceive you and how you twist the environment around that. So, when it also comes to leaders, when it comes to being in a corporate environment, how we use humor is very personal. If we're doing one liners and gags, which are playing with words, it's not necessarily personal, and you can do one-offs like that without it having to be about identity. But a lot of comedy comes and plays with how you're being seen, how people are seeing you, and how you make people laugh by your acknowledgement of that. So I learned how to see myself and play off that during that time. And then there's making yourself vulnerable and the power of vulnerability. So this was quite interesting. For me, I some of you who might follow me on Twitter, I have mentioned a few times that my husband and I struggled with infertility. And when we were sent to do our um, first homework for the course, we were told to talk about what we love and what we hate, and that was supposed to help us give material and get used to thinking things through and presenting it. Not We didn't have to be funny yet, but we just had to bring our own emotions out about topics. And I ended up writing a whole thing about the infertility process because I'm already open about it. I'm open about IVF. I'm open about people not understanding that other people struggle to have children, or they may not have children, not because they don't want them, but because they can't. So I wrote this whole thing and presented this piece about it, from it not work, not our not being able to get pregnant, to the gynecological process, the IVF process, the surveys, the invasiveness, to how many people have seen my vagina, like all those things that make you feel quite dehumanized about the process. And I thought I was being open in this. Like, I wrote it out. I thought I was being open. And our tutor asked everyone how they felt about my bit. And everyone's like, well, we were just hoping that she had a kid in the end. And they're like, yeah, but it was water off a duck's back, wasn't it? And you're like, she didn't show any emotion. She was just talking about it, but she wasn't being vulnerable. And I just started crying in the class. I'm like, I know. I just not even. And I realized how much I was guarding. I thought I was being open and I thought I was being vulnerable, but I wasn't. I was letting people in maybe this much, to give them this much visibility of the pain I was going through and the challenges. But I wasn't letting them in enough to actually bring the reality out, to bring my humanity out of it, and to help people relate so they could see the humor. Because bringing people on a journey, especially if they're coming from a position of not having a background in something, if they're not getting that, they can't relate to you because they haven't gone through it. If you give them their humanity, they can relate to the humanity, they can relate to the pain, but then they can laugh with you. Then they can relate to you. And having that, being able to be there at that point, is where the power is. And I know that some people, one friend was saying, oh, but you have to read Brene Brown. And I have. And what she wrote didn't really speak to me. She talked about the power of it, but until I went through this process, I wasn't able to be vulnerable. So it's all great for me, anyways. Like, everyone learns differently. I read about vulnerability. I agree with vulnerability. I thought I was being vulnerable, but I wasn't. And on that note, also about vulnerability, there was another guy in our course who had a really interesting life. He'd been a professional wrestler, like WWE kind of wrestling, British, traveled all around the States. He was also gay. And he had a really rich background, which I thought, yeah, he'd have some really good jokes to bring. But when he did his jokes, he did talk about being gay. He talked about different things, but he didn't bring any vulnerability. He just went to shock humor. And no matter what our tutor said to try and bring him into being more open and vulnerable to dig in and bring some richness into his humor. Because I was really curious. Oh, that's the other thing about comedy. It's not just about being funny, it's about being interesting, which you really don't think about with comedy and stand up, that you think it's like, oh, you're just chasing the funnies. You're supposed to find the funnies, but people want to find out more about you. They want to find out how you tick. They want to answer the niggling questions about you in there. So when he was doing his shock comedy, some of the stuff was funny, but it got so shock that it kind of made us uncomfortable. But it also, he was guarding himself. So it is something to think about when you're being vulnerable. The power is not just about letting people in, it's about sharing, but it's about the relationship and honesty in that. And yeah, the interest, actually, if we go back to the book I recommended, Humor Seriously, what they had this really interesting 2 by 2 about humor, that just because you tell a joke and no one laughs doesn't mean it's not making you relatable or not building rapport. So even when you tell a joke, and I have to remind myself when I'm doing jokes, just because people didn't laugh doesn't mean they didn't think it's funny, doesn't mean it didn't build that relationship. So it's not all about the joke funnies, it's not all about the laughs, it's not all about getting people into roaring chorus. While it is satisfying, bringing people into chorus of laughter is amazing. But it's something to consider that it's a multifaceted engagement with your audience. And then chatting with them versus talking at them. As I mentioned, I have done public speaking for years. I'm a proficient public speaker. I can deliver a 3-day extended leadership team weekend hungover and exhausted without people realizing it. Like I can manage people and presentations and sessions and keep people on point with not much effort because I'm a professional. That's what I do. But the difference between stand up comedy and presenting is that it's supposed to be a conversation. You're supposed to be talking to your friend at the pub, but with 50 of them in a room. You're supposed to make it a chat, a back and forth. When we present at people and talking at them, it's a monologue. It's them just receiving it. They're they're like the couch and the other, it just absorbing the sound you're doing. By practicing chatting with them and having that response time, that has been a very powerful piece that I've learned from this. About there are times where you need to present, where you need to take people through and signpost, and you're there as the guide. But there's other times when you want to create connection, that the chat, the conversation, even if it's 100 people, treating them like one person and connecting through eye contact, through side responses, through giving them chance to digest. It's a very powerful technique that I've been really enjoying mastering. And then the fourth thing, the importance of setup and creating the right environment. And for us in communications, we can be very focused on the message that needs to go out, the medium it needs to go in. But the environment it's received in, it can sometimes be outside our control, but it's also something that's, we have so many more things going on. The idea of what the environment they're receiving it in feels like it's beyond us. But when I've been at different, so I've done 15 shows now, and even the first show. So this picture actually is from my first show. So we doing the course for 6 weeks. Our last class, we did the class, and then we were presenting to between 100 and 150 people at the comedy for the con school, but at the Backyard Comedy Club in East London. And at that point, if RMC, our compere, hadn't got all the audience into the mood to laugh, our jokes would have fallen so much more flatter. Getting the audience ready to receive, them being in the right situation to feel that they want to engage, creating that environment is essential. As I said, we don't always have control over it, but it does impact how people receive our messages. All right, so what I learned. And so, how has it improved my work? Okay, so I am more comfortable being me. I thought I was already comfortable being me, but this experience has made me realize as much as, like anyone, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want people to not like me, but I'm less concerned with them not liking me. I know that I won't be everyone's cup of tea, but also I know I'm some people's cup of tea. When I do a show, I s when I'm really fortunate, I do have some people come up and say they enjoyed my show, and I'm a newbie comic, and it's open mic, so it can be there can be some really great people that I'm like, "Oh, they made the people laugh more. Oh, they did that." But something about what I said or how I presented spoke to that audience member enough for them to come up and say, "I liked your show." Actually, someone said that I reminded them of Sarah Milligan, which I am years off her stature or ability. But that really touched. And I'm like, okay, that gives me goals. That gives me goals. But at the same time, I know that people who are outside the demographic who don't want to hear about infertility, who aren't interested in being parents and just want to hear dick jokes, they're not going to find me that funny. But someone else will. And that even comes into work, that there's some clients I'm going to work with who I really align with, and there's other people I'm not their cup of tea, but we wouldn't work well together anyway. So I'm not going to cry over spilled milk if they don't hire me. I used to be a bit more concerned about before of molding myself into that, but I know I thrive better with people who want to engage with me. So, and then less thrown by rejection, so that goes on that. Using humor purposefully. So I've better at it now and getting there. And I'm preparing myself for it. So while I used to make like off the cuff remarks, now I do it, yeah. Appreciate and embrace the power of exaggeration. So humor is really interesting because it is about exaggeration. I'm someone who enjoys a very I like to be accurate. I like to be specific, but there is power in exaggeration in the right time. So I'm learning how to use that to focus on the funny and making the impact in the comparisons. And my first social hobby that I don't have to talk about my work. So I am really happy to be in this position because I now have people I get to chat with. We don't talk about work, and I've never had this before, but I'm in an environment where it's very meritocratic. We're focused on the art, we're focused on the humor, current events, and such, and we have fun. And I am loving this part of it. And I think it's helping me relax more because I'm not just on about work, especially as an independent consultant. You can get really wrapped up of landing the client, getting things out. Are you doing enough marketing on LinkedIn? Are you engaging enough? Have you responded to that LinkedIn piece? But now I commit to going out. I have told a compere of a show that I'm going to be there. I have to be there no matter how exhausted I am, and I show up. I do my bit. I do my prep. I perform. I meet people and I improve and I see the improvement and I focus on that. And it's been great. Now, now it's over to you guys. So you've heard about why I chose to do this, what I've got out of it. So I want you to think. What are you curious about? What's outside your comfort zone? Who inspires you or surprises you? So who's out there where you're like, that's not comms, but that's interesting. Ooh, that piques my interest. And is it time to dive into another specialism? And just for the record, CIPR has approved my my comedy course for CPD. I've submitted it. It was I put it down to 3 days worth of course. So I got CPD points for it, and I've also started a comedy writing course this week for 10 weeks. I haven't submitted that yet because it's not finished, but that's going to help me with the use of humor and helping my leaders read through write through humor, create their jokes, think of stuff that will be funny for them, while still helping my stand up, of course. But The reason overall I did this was to help my leaders use humor, but it's expanded my abilities and how I look at humor so much more than I would have expected. So, screenshot this if you need to. I'll give you 3 seconds. Screenshot if you need to work through these questions and challenge yourself to a new CPD adventure. 1, 2, 3, screenshot. Okay. And now I know you guys are dying. Where can you see me perform? Okay, so if you do look at my link tree, I always refresh it. I am going to be, most of my shows are in London, but I am going to be in Oxford and Milton Keynes in the next over the next month. So if you are outside of London and you want to come, also you can follow my journey on Instagram. So yeah, so follow the link tree. The link tree also, if you add me on Instagram, I do have that link tree in my bio, and you can watch a fellow comms person explore the interesting journey of comedy. Also, let me know if you're interested in doing the comedy school course because I can. And if you're, because I do also just let you know, people they do it on. I went on a Sunday course, and we did have some people who did drive in for 6 Sundays to do the course, and it was really worthwhile. And I know it stretched all of us, and it was a great experience and outside one's comfort zone. And with that, I will go back.
Thank you so much, RSK. I find that really interesting, and I have to say, it sounds terrifying. I know a lot of people in the chat saying, "Oh my god, it's my worst nightmare." But I just want to give a little shout out to Vic Slayton here, who some people in the audience might know, and I know she was. She essentially got into stand-up comedy because she was terrified of public speaking and found that it helped her a lot. So do you think there's like quite the crossover there with the skills that you have gained through your comedy?
And I would say that the comedy community is really friendly. Like I was half expecting some political cutthroat, I'm best, etc. But at least on the open mic like you just keep me crossing paths with people. You see the same comics, and even like I messaged Lex and I asked her if she had any Vic, sorry, and I asked her if she had any uh, recommendations for things, and she's like, yeah, try here, get in touch with this person. Like it's a very meritocratic, it's the most meritocratic situation I've ever been in. I know that, okay, there's going to be people about preferences and styles, but as long as you put the effort in, you improve and you see it, and people are there to encourage you.
Yeah, that sounds great. I am very much interested in coming to watch you perform. We have got some great jokes. I hope you're able to have a look at the comments afterwards
Oh,
and check out, see if there's
I
maybe
will look at them.
somebody who you could drag into the old comedy arena with you. And we also have a question, and that is from Jules Loveland. She asks, on vulnerability, what do you think is the difference between just telling people about what you've been through and actually letting them into the emotion of it? And what did you learn to do differently? Is it in what you say or how you say it? Great
It
question.
for me, it was how I said it, because I was talking about infertility in a very sarcastic way.
Mm.
Like, to be frank, over 30 people have seen my vagina. So, like, it's like, "Yep, 30 people have seen it." But when I talk about it, also in kind, this is an example exaggeration. So my tutor's like, "Okay, so 30 is a lot, but it's not as much as someone from Essex who's been sleeping around, so you need to increase that." So that's the kind of thing you have to think about, like, you need to bring it up. So I say 68 people have examined my vagina, medical professionals have examined my vagina. But then I take a point and I say, "That's kind of a lot, right?" Like, it's having that pause and acknowledging it's shit. No one wants that many people looking at your private parts.
Mm.
But then I'm like, how else would I know they have a textbook uterus? That's what medical professionals have told me. So I bring that into it. So I'm, instead of just saying point blank, this is this, I'm like, I'm letting myself have that space. Whereas before I would have, if you feel you're going to cry or you feel really emotional, you're letting people in. Let's just put it that way. Cause I didn't know until I was like that brink of those tears coming, like, yes, I have been scarred for life, which
Mm,
I have. I'm do the needles of IVF really I'm still have some trauma over that, and
yeah,
I say in my set that I can empathize with drug users in a toilet. So it's about bringing people along that journey of that reality, but opening yourself up. I think also you're also opening yourself up to criticism
yeah.
because every time I kind of dig a bit deeper, yeah.
Because I think what I have found is that we can often be like very introspective as comms professionals. And
Mm.
do you think, has kind of been really vulnerable on that comedy stage kind of lessened that introspection, or have you found a way to kind of deal with it more effectively, to a point where it's not, kind of like questioning like, who am I and what is it all about?
So I use what my comedy, I do use a lot of introspection for it. So I give myself pause. So for instance, one of our embryos didn't make it through a thawing, which it felt like a miscarriage outside the body. And I started writing about how our embryos was so depressed at 5 days old, it realized life wasn't worth it. So I I know it sounds really dark, but that's how I'm finding I'm using humor to manage the pain.
Mm,
And whether it turns into a set or not, that's outside of that, but it's that how I'm processing it. It's really it's helping me process, but it's also helping I'm not nothing's outside I'm not pushed nothing's outside of the realm, but it for becoming part of the set, it has to fit within the ecosystem of the set.
yeah, absolutely.
I
And
don't
I
know
think
if
that's
that helped or
yeah, definitely. I think that is a really good point, that we do use humor as kind of that, survival technique, don't we? And especially as we're in this kind of perma crisis, I think sometimes we kind of have to look to humor, don't we, to get through it. I think there are
Mhm.
no more questions. So thank you for sharing where we can find you. And thank you again for a really interesting session. Got some emojis on the bottom there. Next up, we've got Karai, who I believe will be joining us from Dubai, very glamorous. But yeah, thank you, RSK, and we'll see you around, because I'm sure you'll be popping up in a couple of other sessions and at the networking and things like that. Ace, we will see you later.